Good morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we talk about the movie Grosse Pointe Blank, 1 minute at a time. I'm Dev.
And I'm Hugh, and on today's show, we are going to be looking at minute 73. We're still at the reunion ball. We are encountering the vast congregation of weirdos and semi-strangers that Martin and Debbie fled from years ago, but are back with.
And joining us once again on today's show, as he has been all this week, very kindly, once again, we have Kosmas, a film enthusiast extraordinaire. Welcome back, Kosmas. It's good to have you.
Again, thank you so much for your kind words. And it's great to be back for another minute. Well, actually, it's more than a minute, but you guys know what I mean.
Right. And we open this scene with the fearsome duo splitting up to cover more ground, which always works out well in the movies. Martin is quite happily, being propped up by Debbie throughout all these interactions, and then all of a sudden Debbie's like, "I'm going to go say hi to Amy over there."
Yeah.
Martin's
I sometimes wonder how much of this is her testing Martin. Right?
Yeah, I could see that.
The same way she left him to go and talk to the dad. And I think the other part of it is she doesn't know. We know what Martin's like now. She doesn't. So she thinks it's perfectly okay because he's just he's the guy, right? He's the guy she knew, right? He's not really what we know him to be. So when she leaves in this scene, she walks off stage left and stage right, and he the camera's on him, and he goes from confident to little boy terrified in a split second. It's a really nice bit of work by Cusack. And he just doesn't stop moving. Like, I gotta keep walking. And he doesn't like this. He doesn't want to be alone, but he is alone. She's left to deal with people.
And you mentioned this before we started recording, but the look on Martin's face there of this kind of like low level panic, like trying to just keep the panic contained is classic. Before fortuitously he bumps into Paul Spiricki, played by Jeremy Piven, and all of a sudden he's got a partner in crime again, and everything is a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Actually, if Spiricki hadn't walked in at this point, who knows what would have happened?
Yeah.
I mean, Martin's on a short leash, right? We saw in an earlier episode this week that he, nearly broke someone's arm just because they barged in front of him. So yeah, who knows what could happen? I mean, he did leave the gun at home, so hopefully, you'd hope it wouldn't be extreme.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think this minute has some of my favorite lines for Paul. Favorite moment from Jeremy Piven in general, really, because he's got this frantic energy and everything coming out of his mouth is a mile a minute that it's hard to keep track of what he's saying even. It's almost garbled. You kind of pick it out. It really doesn't matter, but it's so real. Like, this is what I do when I'm under stress, is I just start talking way too fast, and I talk a little too fast to begin with. The dialogue as well, split open like a piñata, which I'm pretty sure at the first time I watched this film, I did not know what a piñata was.
Yeah, we don't really do them over here, do we, in England?
Not that I've ever seen, no.
Do you have them in Germany, Kosmas?
I only got to know about them from movies. So but I can't tell you when I first heard about them. So I don't remember the first time hearing about them or Googling them, I guess, or whatever. But yeah, I'm not quite sure why he thinks that he would have been broken, I guess. Why he says that, I guess it just maybe it's like a projection kind of thing, because it seems like he's the one who's more insecure actually. So he just like projects that to him instead of saying it to himself. And I googled Tony Robbins because he said that seems to be like an author or something, but I didn't know him. It's like he does books and coaches people.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I think he was one of the original like motivational speaker kind of guys that did the circuit of like, these, 5 things to be a better, happier person, or like, 5 ways to kind of Dale Carnegie life kind of a deal.
Yeah, that I didn't know until today, like, because I googled that because we would do the minutes. I was like, is that a character again who I missed the name from, who was in the movie for a second or something? But no, it's yeah, like you said, motivational speaker or whatever, or coach, I guess.
Yeah, very, very chiseled features, super handsome, like, yeah.
Yeah, he still looks, I guess, good if you are into men.
Yeah.
I mean, he's 64 now, so yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, he was in his 40s back then. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So it's that sort of sense of looking like artificially, but still socially acceptably.
And then we have the entrance of what I presume to be like basically prom queen from their year, Jenny Slater, played by Tracy Doherty. And we were kind of noting that Tracy Doherty's career was not, it's kind of several, regular roles, a lot of TV work in an episode, here, an episode there. Which I feel is a bit of a shame. You don't get much screen time from her in this film, but she really plays the role of that kind of preppy prom queen 10 years on very, very well, right? Like, she's still got that snobbery, but she's got elegance. She's kind of, very, very, in her element in this environment, it feels.
Yeah,
like
I mean, this is kind of one of those things. So American films have this thing of, the prom queen, the social princess, the alpha female, right? And it's always a thing in these films, and it's all this is already 10, not quite 10 years, 8 years after Heather. So the idea has already been parodied and satirized, yeah. And so this feels like a more realistic take on it. But again, the fact that Spirecki is clearly still smitten with her,
yeah,
and is desperately wants to be acknowledged by her, so much so that he repeats hello more than once. Like,
and yeah,
no chill.
yeah. And then, but straight back to that insane fast talking. Wow, looking for some validation in my life, but apparently it came up short as the kind of the tone and the urgency kind of increases as he's going through it. Yeah,
It's like, really, dude? Okay. I mean, it is very much a prototypical Piven role, isn't it?
It very much is. Yeah, I mean, as we were saying before we started recording, it's just like Very Bad Things. It's like
Ari Gold from Entourage.
Ari Gold's character in Entourage.
That's what you mentioned. He also seems to be more confident around men than with women, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in his role, it's like with his wife as Ari Gold, he's the one who she's the one who controls him, but if it comes to the guys, then he's the one who tells them what to do or how to do stuff.
I totally not realized he was in Black Hawk Down.
Well,
but you can't tell because everyone's got their heads shaven. I mean, it's the thing about Black Hawk Down is there's a huge number of stars, and I remember seeing it in the cinema, and I spent like the first 10 minutes going, "Wait, is that so and so? Is that so and so?" And then in the next 10 minutes, half of them are dead. And you're like, okay, it's like Saving Private Ryan, right?
Yeah.
Or Thin Red Line.
Thin Red Line was another one. Yeah, which funnily enough had Cusack. Yeah, so
circle back.
It absolutely, but it was a 90s thing, wasn't it, to be in a World War II film, right? And you had people making choices between films. If memory serves, who was it? Was it Clooney or Travolta? Somebody made a choice between Thin Red Line and Saving Private Ryan, and then really regretted it when they saw the final version on screen and saw they'd been edited down to like barely nothing. And it's like, well, sorry, that's you go with the Thin Red Line, you're going with a director who will do that. But yeah, it is definitely a thing. You're right to draw that point about Piven. I mean, Piven is a character who is insecure in the extreme when he's out of his depth. He needs to be around other men. The characters he plays, at least. I mean, I have no idea what he's like as a person, but I find it intriguing that this is kind of a through line of his characters. Right? He always plays motor mouths, slightly off kilter, insecure people.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mr. Selfridge is where you really see the flip side of that.
Oh yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And he definitely has range there. He can play the other side of it. So I'm not sure it's necessarily a part of his personality, but I think it's his way into comedy is that persona. That's his avenue into the more comedic side of things, which is, I think, what he is really excellent at. Although he's also excellent in Mr. Selfridge. I think that show is just massively underrated.
I'm gonna
Not seen yet.
Yeah, I was gonna
it's
say
worth
I haven't
it.
either, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was just going to come back to the article I mentioned last episode about from the Midwest Film Journal 2017, Grosse Pointe Blank being written up as the class of '97. There's a great paragraph here where they're having talked about in the one I quoted earlier in the previous episode about the hang-ups of previous ones, of other characters. Writer Nick Rogers then zooms in on Piven. This is high-rolling real estate king Paul, Jeremy Piven, remains chuffed that Jenny Slater, on whom he doted in high school to the point of writing essays for her, still won't give him the time of day. Paul is the first person to whom Martin reveals his actual post-high school path. He laughs off the absurdity of Martin's seemingly jokey exaggeration, but Martin confronts a different absurdity. What exactly would be a more acceptable explanation to Paul for Martin's 10 years away? Their shared anxieties explode in an incredulous, horn-honking shout that remains the funniest bit Piven has ever gotten to play, and which seems to genuinely surprise Cusack. And I think that's fair, right? I feel like 10 years, man, is a thing that you just don't forget once you've seen this film. And every time you see Piven, that's the thing I remember. It's 10 years, man. It's such a great line, such a great bit of delivery. But I love the idea that it's not just he's still trying like he was at high school with Jenny. It's the fact that he almost relishes being shot down again.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like that is going to pivot, and unfortunately I don't think we're going to actually be able to bask in that until next week. But I think there is a scene, and it doesn't get much screen time, but there is a scene where you see that maybe reversed a little bit with Piven's success or lack thereof with Jenny Slater, or I should say Paul Spuricky's success or lack thereof with Jenny Slater. But also, I think, doesn't Martin actually end up telling Debbie before he tells Paul? I'm sure that radio sequence happens before because he meets up with Paul on exiting the radio booth.
I mean, the article may have got it slightly wrong. I mean, we're going in,
but the sentiment, the sentiment, right. The sentiment is definitely there. I mean, he has this great comic presence in this film that fits right into a character type that you can totally imagine from a high school, of being the and also friend of someone that wasn't necessarily the popular guy in high school, but definitely the leader of the clique that he was in. And it's absolutely nails it.
No, it's a nice minute. It's a really interesting kind of encapsulation of what makes these actors good, what makes this film work. What makes everything that we've been doing in all of these episodes. This minute is exactly why you can break this film down as far as we have. And as we roll in towards the end of it, I particularly like the moment of connection again between Martin and Paul, right? I like the fact that, Jenny having acknowledged how good Martin's looking and then deliberately snubbed Paul, it then turns into a kind of semi-bonding experience for the two
Yeah.
And it's this idea, the way Martin, the moment she turns away, Martin is all focused on Paul, right? And even though the camera shows us her walking away as Paul looks at her, Martin's all about Paul. This is his buddy. This is his friend. They're back where they were, And the last line before the minute changes is from Paul, where he says, it's a festival of pain. Which is funny because, of course, in a film that is supposed to be also a hitman action thriller, and we're in the rom-com mode, we've had a couple of shootouts, but we've not had. I mean, this is foreshadowing, right? We're about to get, a festival of pain is round the corner. But, for Martin, not for Paul. Although Paul will have an emotional one afterwards. And yeah, that's the point where the minute then cuts to Martin talking to him and trying to bond with him. And you can see, and that brings us back to the main themes of the film. But we can address that in the next episode.
So the other thing I kind of want to circle back to is the music, because we kind of this block of minutes has a lot of different tracks playing in it as they kind of cut between scenes. We had Aha, obviously, with Take On Me. This scene sees the end of the track that we were hearing in the previous minute, which I think is White Lines by Grandmaster Melly Mel.
Mm-hmm.
And then the start of, obviously, the Bangles' Walk Like an Egyptian, which is a very, very identifiable song. And just some, kind of classic music from the era that, you're probably going to have heard at some point in your life. And, for these characters, they'd have definitely been growing up with them, but also quite a diversity of styles, right? I mean, well, Take On Me and Walk Like an Egyptian I'd have classed as fairly poppy, like fairly mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the Bangles is maybe even a little early for this. We've talked before about how much 70s music there is in Grosse Pointe Blank, and it kind of a bit of a Martin and Debbie grew up liking a slightly retro stuff, rather than the more, I guess, manufactured music that struck big in the 80s. But then, Melly Mel is very, very 80s.
Yeah.
So it's just a great piece of scoring again.
Yeah. No, it's both a grab bag and yet at the same time a very carefully thought through set of tracks. I mean, for me, I think it's interesting you make the point about the Bangles. I mean, so 83 when I moved to Switzerland, I was very much still listening to the sort of things I'd grown up with in the 70s. Most of which came from my parents. So it was Nina Simone, it was ABBA, it was Boney M, it was the Beatles, it was all sorts. And then when I got to Switzerland, I can remember being on a tram home with a couple of guys from my year. So this is like year 8, and then we've got Walkmans because it's early days. We've all got early Walkmans and we've got different sets, and they like put the headphones on me and said, "You got to try this out." And it was heavy metal, right? It was my first Iron Maiden album. It was Number of the Beast. Blew my mind, and so for the next few years I was a metaler, and so there was a real contrast between what was mainstream and what people like me listening to metal thought was not the mainstream. Okay, and I think it's interesting that felt like it collapsed somewhere in the mid '80s. It felt like enough people from indie scene and metal scene and anything that was out on the edges were landing up in the mainstream. They were starting to have hit albums and sell enough and all this kind of thing. And I feel like that. I think the Bangles are a good example of that, right? People don't realize how indie they were in LA to begin with. Paisley Underground, small EPs and albums. Going down to Liverpool is very much kind of what they sounded like. And then Prince comes along and sprinkles his, gold dust, his fairy gold dust that he does on various people throughout the '80s. and gives them this hit, Manic Monday, and they also do Walk Like an Egyptian. And the funny thing is, if you listen to the rest of their career, nothing sounds like that album, right? Nothing sounds like those two singles. That's not them. And there's a real sense of that in the 80s, of like bands having unusual songs that don't represent them become hits. And I think that's one of the things that makes it so interesting. You are right to say this is poppy, this is weird. Like even Aha were kind of like, who is this weird Scandinavian band with the high vocals? But people went nuts for it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I'm also, I kind of been doing a little bit of digging around. I'm not sure it's actually Melly Mel's version of White Lines. I think it might be the Duran Duran version, which would put it much more back into
that
Martin's
makes sense.
wheelhouse. But
That makes sense.
on the title credits, it's actually Melly Mel that's credited as the performer for this, and I think he does cameo in the Duran Duran version.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm kind of curious about that, and I'm also not entirely sure that I've called out the right track here, because there's so much dialogue in this minute that you've got a very low level, and I'm not sure if it refeatures again later on or not.
Fair enough.
Probably
We'll come
should
back
have
to it when we get a
researched more
chance.
before we went live on the recording.
That's okay. I'm sure we'll come back to it soon enough. There's so much more to be said about music, and we've still got the credits to come.
It's true. Yeah.
This was minute 73 of the Grosse Pointe Blank podcast, Debi Radio, 79.5 FM, featuring co-hosts, co-writers, and co-producers Dev Soligar and Hugh David.
Today's guest was once again the wonderful Kosmas, film reviewer and fan extraordinaire. Where can we find you, Kosmas?
On Instagram and X, and also on IMDb, as you guys mentioned before. So thank you very much.
And you can find us on all good podcast players, maybe even like the one you're listening to us on now. Or if you're watching us, that would have been on YouTube. So you can check us out there. You can find us on X, formerly known as Twitter, and on Spotify. All of those is at Debi Radio, as well as our website, debiradio.com. All of those, it is DEBI.
And finally, if you want to talk with us, join us on the Facebook listeners group, Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't a moment, it was a feeling of movement.